Birmingham, Alabama is known as the Magic City. It has also earned the reputation as the alt football capital of the world. From the 1974 Birmingham Americans of the World Football League to the original Birmingham Stallions of the USFL from 1983 to 1985, even to the World League of American Football's Birmingham Fire in 1991 and 1992. Birmingham was also the home of one of the teams in the CFL's failed American experiment, the colorfully clothed Birmingham Barracudas. Now, the pro football team that had the most longevity in Birmingham, the Birmingham and later the Alabama Steel Dogs of Arena Football 2, who played at the Birmingham Jefferson Convention Center from 2000 to 2007. Now, Legion Field was the home to the majority of the outdoor pro leagues, including the 2001 Birmingham Bolts of the XFL and the 2019 Birmingham Iron of the Alliance of American Football. Most recently, the sparkling new Protective Stadium in Birmingham. That was the hub of the new incarnation of the USFL in 2022 and its champion, the new Birmingham Stallions. On this episode, I'm joined by Scott Adamson, a 30-year newspaper veteran from Birmingham, who chronicles his memories of the Magic City's forays into alternative pro football in the book Home Team, My Bromance with Off-Brand Football. Well, if we're going to ask the question, why is Birmingham the alt football capital of what seems to be the world, then why not bring in the guy who, to me, wrote the book on that, and that is Scott Adamson, who wrote the book. It's called My Bromance with Off-Brand Football. You can also follow him on Adamson Media. Scott, I appreciate you taking the time here to join me and to talk about this. And it felt like, your book is great because it's not just about the history of alternative pro football in Birmingham, but it's also about your memories of it. And it seemed like before the revival of the XFL in 2020, you couldn't have an alternative pro football team that was located anywhere. You had to have one in Birmingham. Why has that felt like that's always been the case?
Yeah, that is odd because, you go back to the original or to the only World Football League that matters to me in 1974. And, I'm a 13-year-old kid. So all of a sudden my city gets a team. And, I'm not thinking that the WFL is ever going to fold. I just figure, okay, we got the Birmingham Americans in the World Football League and it's going to be here forever. Well, obviously that wasn't the case. But I just didn't realize at the time there would be so many alternative leagues that would come along. But I think Birmingham kind of set the tone, especially with the Americans in 1974. I mean, they had huge crowds. There was, I think, their second home game against Memphis, they had nearly 60,000 people. And they just really, really supported that team. And then to a degree, I know the second year of the WFL, it folded after 12 weeks. But we were, as a city, we're still the attendance leaders there. So I think after the WFL went under, when people came along and decided they were going to start a new league, and they were looking at cities that would support it, we'd already kind of set the tone for being a town that was really going to show up for non-NFL professional football.
You mentioned the Americans, of course, the WFL champions here. I know you were a fan. The Vulcans, actually, the next year you mentioned, they were kind of the de facto champions because they had the best record and folded. You talked about that. Was the WFL, were they the first to really call a first other pro football team on a national scale to call Birmingham home, or are there some that maybe got lost in history?
No, I mean, if you really want to get technical, the Continental Football League had a team, the Alabama Hawks, which were based in Huntsville. But it seems like maybe the last 4 or 5 games of their final season, and I don't have it in front of me, I can't remember if this is 1969 or 1970, they moved to Birmingham. Well, I say they moved to Birmingham. Their offices remained in Huntsville, but they decided to play in Birmingham thinking that they might could draw and stabilize. But I don't think they ever had over 2,000 or 3,000 people show up for their game. So after that season ended, that just, the Alabama Hawks ended, and there was, that I guess was as close as Birmingham had come to a minor football league or a professional football league that other people had heard of. I mean, in the past, I think in the 60s, there was something called the Southern League, but I think it was like a lot of these minor leagues where if the guys got paid at all, it was, $5 a game or something.
Right. And it seems like, or if they got, you're right. If they got paid at all, you look at some planned leagues that are coming up. Now, you know how that is. We've seen it so many times. There's a planned league, and it never really has its first kickoff. But you look at, there's something called Major League Football. Actually, there are two different ones called Major League Football. There's something called the American Spring Football League, several others. Every one of these have Alabama or Birmingham on the list. Are you optimistic that, of course, now 2022, we saw the USFL, which was a national product, make Birmingham its home. But are you optimistic that a team, another professional football team or professional football league, number one, will be successful, and number two would be successful in Birmingham?
No, just to be honest,
you've been heartbroken so many times. I know.
Exactly. I mean, I've been doing this now for over 40 years. So
wow.
If you're looking for optimism, I just don't have it. I mean, as far as the modern minor league USFL, they had a proof of concept year last year. They're coming back, and that's great. So we'll set them aside for a moment. But if you look at these other leagues like Major League Football, one of them had a team, I think the Alabama Airborne, based in Mobile.
Right.
And, that turned into just a huge fiasco. They had training camp in Mobile and all of a sudden ran out of money. So all the players are scurrying. And that particular Major League Football, they've been trying since 2014 to start up, and they still haven't done it. So I don't know why anyone would waste any time and effort on that. But I know in your area in Louisville, another Major League Football weren't they supposed to start last year, but then they postponed until 2023?
Correct. And they were, I continued. I actually did an interview with the guy who is the commissioner, and they were trying to kick off in the fall of 2022. It didn't happen. I asked around to some different people if they were going to look at Cardinal Stadium. I tried to ask him if they had found a place in Louisville. That one, I don't know if it's ever going to get off the ground. I think they have tried to push that to 2023. And I never really understood. That was one I didn't understand the concept of, because you're going to play in the fall. And one of the places that he wanted to play was in Dallas. And he said, and they said, well, we'll when the Cowboys are on the road, we'll play at home. And I don't know, that just playing pro football in the fall against another league like the NFL, I'm not sure about.
No, and when the Cowboys are on the road, they're still on television, or on television
everywhere.
So I just
right.
don't know. Yeah, that's to me, and I know I'm very different than most people, because I think the reason that these spring leagues start is because you don't have to compete with college or pro. But for me personally now, since I think I've kind of aged out of a lot of the spring alt football, I would love to see the NFL have a G League type league. I know it would have to be crammed in somewhere like on a Tuesday night or something, but to me, the concept of having, like, say Louisville, for example, say they were the farm club of the Cincinnati Bengals or whatever, it'd be kind of cool to see a player get called up, to play on Sunday, or to have a player from the Bengals sent down to play in that league. I would like that concept. And I've always wondered why the NFL, maybe now it's too late, but at some point, that just seemed like a logical thing for them to do.
Always thought that too. They tried it with NFL Europe, and they had an agreement, I believe, with the World League of American Football, which, of course, World League had a team in Alabama, did they not?
Yep, the Birmingham Fire. But there again, you're dealing with a spring schedule. I've always just wondered why the NFL hasn't tried to, maybe start a league, after
in the fall.
Camp. Right. Yeah. Started like in October or whatever, kind of like the United Football League did.
Yeah, and it seems like there would be an appetite, for that, and I think there would be an appetite too if you had an NFL connected league that would play in cities that are hungry for football, like Louisville, like Birmingham. I think that's a great idea, but I guess the NFL feels like college football is their feeder system. They don't even have to put any money into it.
Yeah, and especially the way college football is now, when you have so many of these elite teams that have guys that are, they're ready to play in the NFL as juniors in college. So, yeah, that's a free farm system for them.
Going back to your memories, and I recommend anyone, what I really loved about your book, My Bromance with Off-Brand Football, which was perfectly titled, because we all get made fun of for loving these spring football leagues, and it's off-brand, as one of my friends calls it. You love third world football. But going back to that, and what I liked about the book, and I've told people this too, is like, it doesn't get dragged down into game summaries or just, this was a team that existed, but it was your memories of it. And when you go back and look, was that WFL team, was that your favorite of all that came through Birmingham? And I know you love the CFL too, and there was that that flirtation with America there for a year with CFL, and I know they had a team there in Birmingham.
Yeah, no, the Americans would have to be my first love, just because, again, I'm a 13-year-old kid. I was a fan of the New York Jets, but New York was a pretty long drive from Birmingham, so I never went there. And just never dreamed leading up to that year that Birmingham would ever have a professional football team. So to have one, and for them to be so good, and for the crowds to be so into it, and two, you're a kid growing up where Alabama and Auburn football were king, and then all of a sudden you have Alabama and Auburn guys playing together on a team representing Birmingham. There was just something that was really cool about that to me. And just I can still remember that opening night, July 10th, 1974, just the smells and the heat and everything else. I mean, it's just all these years later, I truly can almost retrace my steps throughout that entire game. So no matter what has happened since or what will happen in the future, the Americans will always be my first love, just because they were the first on the scene and just really captured my imagination in such an incredible way.
Well, you tell some great stories in that book about those times, and they played at Legion Field, which the USFL used a little bit this past year. Did you? I know you and we got to meet and have lunch down there in Birmingham when I came down to check out some USFL action. Did you ever go to any of the games, or did you check it out? Or as you said, are you completely aged out and you're tired of being heartbroken by these leagues?
No, I was at the first game, because I'm going to have to be at the first game. If Birmingham is a pro football team and they play a first game, I got to be there. And it was, to me, what was interesting, and I guess it's just kind of because every other team that I'd followed had played at Legion Field, for that first game to be at Protective Stadium, this nice, shiny, new thing, it was like, the torch has been passed. I mean, that era that was so important to me is over. And now, hopefully a new era is starting for young kids who, maybe they're 12 or 13 or whatever, and they had the same experience with the new Stallions that I did with the Americans. And that's got to be a great feeling, to just all of a sudden you walk into a building and there's your team. I mean, that's just, you can't beat that when you're first developing a love for sports.
No, that is a great point. And when I was down there, I came down for a weekend. The Birmingham, of course, all the teams played there, and Protective Stadium was beautiful. It was everything. The parking was great. It was a great setup there. But when the Birmingham team played, that was by far the most people that were in there the entire weekend. Of course, the one weekend I came down, it was the one game they lost all season. But I was on the Birmingham bandwagon from day one, so we won the championship. So I was happy about that. And finally, we'll wrap up with this, Scott. We talking about the USFL. That even if Birmingham isn't the main hub for 2023, are you optimistic about the survival and the popularity of the USFL, the new incarnation of it, especially with the XFL coming on in 2023?
Honestly, I just can't get a feel of what I really think is going to happen, because obviously a league like this can work. I mean, if you look at the games, if you look at the championship game specifically, that was a great game. And, there are plenty of talented players to stock this league, the XFL, and any other FL that comes along. But, I guess it just comes down to the people that run it. How much money do they want to make? How much money do they think they can make over time? And will the novelty wear off? What I'm thinking this year is you've got the XFL that starts, I think, February 18th.
It does.
Their season's winding down when the USFL reboots in April. Mm-hmm. Will people have football fatigue? Will they pick right up and start watching the USFL? I just don't know, and it's hard, since I've kind of, sort of faded out a little bit from that. I can't really look into the minds of spring football fans. I mean, hopefully they'll still be there, but whether they're going to be there in enough numbers and, make it financially viable for the thing to last over 3 years, it's just hard for me to say.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. I think the good thing for both these leagues is they are backed by network money or very rich people. This is not a people trying to come in and they think they're going to make money on this. I think that Eric Shanks, who is with Fox Sports, this has been the USFL was his pet project, and it's financed for at least 2 or 3 years. So that's at least a positive there. So hopefully I can come down and check it out, and we can have lunch again and reminisce about the old days, because this has been fun, and that was a lot of fun too.
Hey, I would love to do that. Love to see you again. And maybe I'll go to a game with you this time. You can drag me back, and I can get back into spring mode again.
I'm going to make you fall in love with spring football again.
Do it.
I know you've been heartbroken, and I know. And I think as one of the book reviews said, it was your book is it's memorable, it's nostalgic, but you're also a tortured soul. And I thought, yeah, that does make sense. His name's Scott Adamson. The Home Team, My Bromance with Off-Brand Football is the book. You can also follow him at adamsonmedia.com and sign up. I tell you, go there, sign up for the newsletter. You'll get a article in your email about once or twice a week. That it's always fun to read.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Scott.